The cheerleaders can break dress code because they're school uniforms? Guess I'm wearing mine. Someone's story about their friend wearing a skirt to school and getting bloomers reminded me of my own malicious compliance in high school. Way! Back in 2013, I was a sophomore in high school, and there was a tradition that on Fridays the cheerleaders, football players, without their pads, of course, band members, and the other groups performing wore their uniforms to class. This wasn't a written tradition, and only the cheerleaders and dance teams' uniforms broke dress code. Nobody really batted an eye to it. I wasn't a skirt person, but I liked dresses once in a while, sorry. As one can tell by my user, I grew up in Texas, and it's still significantly hot in August-September. So one time while wearing a casual sundress in September, I was pulled out of class and reprimanded because the end of my dress was 4 inches above the knee when the dress code said no shorter than 2. I pointed out the cheerleaders and dance teams' uniforms every Friday and how they reached mid-thigh at their longest, but was told that was okay because students can wear official school uniforms, and was sent home to change. Clearly, somehow someone had forgotten I was on the golf team. Immediately, my mind was turning to the next Friday. The school had recently upgraded the golf team uniforms the year prior, and the girls' team uniforms consisted of a short-sleeve collared polo shirt and a skirt. If you don't know what a skirt is, it's essentially a skirt and short shorts combined. It looks like a skirt, but they essentially act like built-in bike shorts. And these F***kickers were short, I'd argue shorter than the average cheerleader skirt. So, that next Friday, about 3 days later, to my parents' surprise, I was ready to go that morning in my golf uniform, as compared to taking a bag to keep the clothes in to change into after school. But I just said Fridays we can wear our uniforms to class. And they accepted without question and took me to school. Well, by second period I was sent to the office yet again, and the first thing the assistant principal asked me was why I would deliberately disobey her right after our last conversation, and threatened in school suspension. I'll never get anywhere in life by not listening, yada yada yada. When I finally had a chance to get a word in, I said, "But this is my school golf uniform," and I pointed to our school's logo that was sewn into my polo shirt. "You said students can wear official school uniforms to class. Why are the cheerleader uniforms okay and mine isn't? This isn't even a skirt. It's a skirt. It has pants." I still remember how pissed off she was. She stared me down for what seemed like a millennia. Then she snapped and told me to get out of her office and go sit in the lobby area. That I knew what she meant and she would be calling my parents about this blatant disrespect. So I waited and played on my iPod and chatted with the nice secretary, trying to keep myself distracted, because in reality, I had been really trying not to cry. I had massive anxiety when it came to authority, but I still had my naive sense of injustice, and I didn't just want to let this go. After about 20 minutes, she popped her head out and, in a very monotone voice, told me I could go back to class and to let teachers know I had gotten permission from the front office to wear my uniform. Then she went back in and closed the door before I could even think to respond. I spent the rest of my day dealing with teachers questioning me about my outfit, and one or two calling the front office to double-check my claim that I had, in fact, gotten permission, and went to practice after school as normal before being carpooled back home. My dad met me at the front door with a small smirk, and I asked him what in the world happened because I knew he was the go-to contact for my school, so I knew she called him. He explained that when she called and tried to get him to come to the school and get me, and talked about punishments for my insubordination, he immediately began to argue with her, and admitted he raised his voice quite a bit, asking why I wasn't allowed to wear my sport uniform that the school provided to me as a dress requirement at my golf practice, and mentioned taking this all the way to the school board and resolving this obvious favoritism. He then asked me not to do that again, but that he was proud of me, and told me, "I know I had told you never to start a fight, but to always fight back." I always thought physically. "But you damn sure took the advice." Story 2. Forcing me to have an office instead of work from home. Thanks for the free dollar, 10K. So I was working as a consultant and got promoted to management, and now had a team of 4 consultants working for me at the client site, which I also went to every day. Since I was already the senior consultant and team leader, this meant very little change to my everyday job. But as part of being management, I was now going to be assigned an office at our company HQ, as I took on a couple of other tiny clients, so I couldn't technically be officed at the big client's site. This being a pretty small company, I knew most of the other management folks just worked from home since we spent all of our time at client sites. So I asked HR if they would authorize the purchase of a multifunction printer for my home office so I could print, fax, scan, etc. and just be home-based. No effing way, they replied, as that could cost as much as $700, $800, plus I might expect IT support. And besides, I had access to all of that stuff at my shiny new office at HQ. So the geniuses assigned me an office. This is a private 10x10 office in the NYC office market, so it's costing them some dollar to waste this space on me. Thankfully, the previous occupant had left the office jam-packed with piles of papers on the desk, etc., which I left completely untouched so it might look to passers-by like I was actually using the office. I visited it once when I had to interview some folks at HQ, stuck my nameplate up on the door and never went back. That's not even the malicious compliance. If I had been home-based, policy would have been that leaving my home to go to the client was just part of job expectations. But since they assigned me a physical office at HQ, every time I went to the client site, I was technically traveling away from my office, and the rules meant it was now covered by travel and expense policy. This meant I should now expense the mileage at roughly 50 cents per mile. Cha-ching! And since the client site was 75 miles away from my home, this meant every trip to the client site earned me $1.75, 150 miles x 50 cents. Since I went there almost every day, this meant a weekly cash raise of $375 and $75/day x 4 or 5 days. And all because someone didn't want to spend $700 on a printer for me. I expensed those miles every day for the remainder of the time I worked there, cashing in over $10K a year in free money. Story 3. No alcohol policy plus lenient work-from-home policy led to interesting solutions. Roughly 2 years before the pandemic, I worked for a company with a fairly lenient alcohol policy. In fact, at some company events, even on company property, they served alcohol. It was not uncommon for executives and managers to have a drink at lunch on a Friday and finish out the day. One day, one of my employees went to lunch on his 21st birthday and had a couple of beers, and I drove him back into work to finish out his shift. He does basic computer input, has no contact with customers or operating machinery or anything dangerous. I got a note from HR that I need to give him a formal warning for what he did when they heard about it. I pointed out that there isn't a policy to enforce, and they decided to create a zero-tolerance alcohol policy based on this event. What they didn't understand was that they had 2 other policies in effect that we exploited in order to make sure that people didn't infect the workforce. There was an infection reduction policy that allowed for people who called in sick after working part of the day to go home and get paid for the whole day. We could use this once per paycheck. Every 2 weeks. There was another work-from-home policy that allowed for employees to work from home for half a day without needing a reason. We could also use this once per paycheck every 2 weeks. After hearing about this zero-tolerance alcohol policy, I instructed all of my employees that if they were going to have a drink at lunch, that they should either call in sick for the rest of the day or work from home the rest of the day. Eventually, it got to the point where we would have a drink at lunch every Friday and alternate work from home or call in sick. Drunkenness, after all, counted as a sickness to the letter of the policy. We called it F*it Friday.